In October 1843, at Blackwell Island Prison in New York, 22-year-old Sarah Kane sat in the women's block, waiting in a cold, damp cell. The sound of guards echoed through the halls. They were coming for her. That day, she was called in for what was labeled a medical exam, though it was anything but. In reality, it was a degrading checkup done without care or respect. Sarah was locked into a wooden restraint, her neck and arms clamped so tightly she couldn't move. The warden carried out a rough search, ignoring her pleas and mocking her distress. There was no medical purpose, just a show of power meant to intimidate and control. In 1845, reformer John Griscom visited Blackwell Island and wrote about the horrifying conditions. He described how women were treated more like property than people, stripped of basic rights. The windowless, freezing cells gave guards full control, and anyone who protested faced harsh punishment: solitary confinement, starvation, or physical abuse. For women like Sarah, prison wasn't about correction. It was a place where basic humanity vanished in the face of daily cruelty. In the mid-1800s, America was changing fast. There were major reforms, new technologies, and new ways of thinking about justice. Prisons like the Auburn system in New York and the isolation model in Philadelphia were created to fix criminals through labor and reflection. But these ideas were designed by men for men and completely failed when it came to women. Women's prison blocks turned into places where violence and abuse were common, hidden behind the idea of moral reform. In 1882 alone, over 9,000 women in New York were arrested for so-called moral crimes. Most were poor, homeless, and couldn't read or write. Society claimed prison would cleanse their souls. But at what cost? How many women had to suffer for the sake of this moral mission? As fog rolled over the prison in the early morning, the cold seeped into every crack. The bell rang for roll call, and the wife of a shoemaker was locked up for stealing bread to feed her kids. That morning, she was beaten for not getting up fast enough. For her and others, each day started in pain. Jennifer, only 16, used to be a seamstress. She ended up in prison after running away from a man who tried to assault her. Her crime? Being accused of immoral behavior. Now she was forced to meet with the warden regularly, where she was expected to provide services. Margaret, a widow, was jailed because she couldn't pay off her late husband's debts. The law didn't let her inherit anything, but still made her responsible for what he owed. She lay coughing blood in her cell. Clara, an immigrant from Ireland, struck her abusive husband with a pan to protect herself and her child. Now, she was regularly beaten by guards for daring to fight back. In prison, your background didn't matter. Whether you were the wife of a merchant or the daughter of a farmer, all that remained inside was pain. At the time, the law didn't see women as individuals. They were treated as property, belonging to a husband, a father, or the state. In places like New York and Philadelphia, a man could have his wife jailed without a trial. A written statement accusing her of being unstable or not doing her duties at home was enough. In 1848, while the first Women's Rights Convention was taking place in Seneca Falls, just miles away in Monroe County, 23-year-old Louise Strong was jailed for refusing her husband's advances after childbirth. She was locked in a facility and forced to attend obedience sessions, where she faced silence, starvation, and beatings. A woman's body was considered her husband's to control. Saying no was seen as breaking the family. If a woman ran away, she could be arrested for vagrancy. If she stood up for herself, she was accused of creating public trouble. One 1869 report from Philadelphia mentioned a mother of three, Mrs. Delison, who was imprisoned simply for raising her voice at her husband in public. Unmarried women had slightly more freedom, but even that was viewed as suspicious. Being independent could get you labeled as immoral. Courts and jails were run entirely by men, and they judged women based on rules they made themselves. Every woman who entered prison faced a process designed to humiliate her. She had to undress in front of male guards. This wasn't done privately. Instead, it happened in shared cells where others could see. They called it a body check. In the 1850s, it became a public shaming ritual. Anna Morgan, 28, was arrested for using inappropriate language on the street. She later recalled how the guards made her strip completely. bend over, and then insert a stick between her legs while laughing and mocking her. Afterward, they simply said, "Next." Women's hair was shaved off, supposedly to prevent lice. Personal items like crosses or wedding rings were taken away. But the worst part was the total loss of privacy. Toilets were just open holes in the corner of shared cells. Women had to relieve themselves in full view of each other and the guards. This wasn't just poor hygiene. It was a way to crush their dignity. Their clothing was made of rough scraps, sewn to hide their bodies, and stripped them of any trace of femininity. The gray and brown tones of their dresses were meant to reflect their hopelessness. Meals were barely enough to survive. Thin gruel, stale bread, and water that wasn't always clean. Meat came once a week, vegetables even less. Many fell sick with diseases caused by hunger and poor nutrition. Beds of just straw, rarely changed. In winter, the cold was so severe that women had to huddle together just to stay warm. In the summer, the prison turned into a furnace. The heat was suffocating. But even then, the women were expected to behave properly. But how could anyone stay composed in a place like that? The day started at 5 a.m. and didn't end until 10 at night. Most of the women worked in the laundry. They weren't just washing prison uniforms. They were also cleaning clothes for hotels and private clients. They stood for hours over tubs of boiling water mixed with harsh chemicals, scrubbing and rinsing until their hands were raw and bleeding. The hot steam burned their skin, and the chemicals wore through flesh. Wet sheets had to be lifted and wrung out by hand. Their backs ached, but stopping wasn't allowed. This hard labor was a moneymaker for the prison. Private laundry contracts brought in thousands of dollars each year. The women, however, earned just a few cents a day, most of which was taken back to cover expenses. In reality, they were working for free, building profits for the system. Even pregnant women were made to work until they gave birth. Mothers were sent back to work only days after delivery. Some were forced to wash blood-soaked hospital linens with no protection. Many got sick from infections. Refusing to work led to punishment: solitary confinement, starvation, or flogging. But the workday was only part of the nightmare. At night, the prison became even more dangerous. Male guards held complete control over the women's quarters. The cell doors offered no safety. Sexual abuse was common, and it was part of the unspoken system. It didn't always happen violently. Often, it came in the form of quiet coercion. Trade your body for a piece of bread, a blanket, or a break from punishment. Saying no only made things worse. There was no one to tell. The administration ignored it or saw it as a way to keep control. Some even viewed sexual abuse as part of the discipline process. Giving birth in prison didn't mean the suffering ended. Most women delivered without medical help, often in front of other prisoners. Midwives were rare, and doctors barely showed up. Many women died from infections after childbirth. Those who lived had to care for their newborns in dirty, crowded cells. Babies stayed with their mothers, sleeping on straw and eating leftovers. Many died in their first months. Some were sent to orphanages or taken in by family, if they were lucky, but most weren't. Disease and hunger took child after child. Health care was almost non-existent. Women's illnesses were ignored. Menstrual pain was dismissed as weakness. No supplies were given. Women had to tear up their clothing to make makeshift pads, which they secretly washed at night. If blood stained their clothes, they were punished. Contagious diseases like tuberculosis and syphilis spread unchecked. There was one toothbrush for the whole cell block, one wash basin, and mold-covered walls. A government report in 1897 found that the death rate for women in New York prisons was over 4 times higher than for men. That's because the system didn't just see women as criminals. It saw them as threats to the very structure of society. In 1865, a prison official wrote that a woman who broke the law fell further than a man and deserved harsher treatment. This belief justified nearly anything. In January 1892, something horrific happened at Franklin County Prison in Ohio. It was left out of official reports, but a guard's letter, later found in state archives, revealed the truth. After a dispute with guards, 5 women were locked in a basement cell. One asked for clean rags during her period and said, Better to die than live like this. A guard overheard it. That night, they were stripped, tied to the wall, and beaten with belts. Beth lost consciousness. Molly Drake couldn't walk afterward. One woman died 2 days later. Stories like these sparked action. In the 1870s, reformers like Zenobia Fay fought for women-run prisons with basic care and dignity. Sherborne Prison in Massachusetts introduced separate areas for mothers' education and sewing workshops. But these improvements reached only a few. Most remained in brutal conditions. Today, women are still the fastest-growing prison population. Many face poor health care, sexual abuse, and separation from children. In 2020, Chastity Congress gave birth alone in a Texas jail. Her baby died. We've changed the buildings, but have we changed how we treat women behind bars?